Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. So I'm going to begin this video for the school. Before I begin, I want to share a few things about myself. First of all, I want to say to all of you that there are many materials that I have uploaded in the group. All those materials will be utilized. On top of being an occultist, I am a scholar, and I like to draw from the original sources. This was taught to me by one of my mentors. The reason for this is because a lot of the time certain statements are taken out of context by other people. So it's important that you get the gist from the original source. So I'm going to read from these sources so that you can tell where I'm coming from, and we can discuss what it is that's being stated from that source. So there are a lot of people that are against books. They think because we're in the age of the internet that we don't need books anymore. I'm not one of those people. I have a house full of books. It's not that all my knowledge is book knowledge. I have practiced my craft for over 40 years. But books are extremely important, and I'll tell you why. There are certain books that you just can't get. You can't get the information outside of those books. Certain people have risen to a state of realization, and they've written these realizations down. And once you begin to realize this, you can go directly to the source and you can see what is being stated, rather than trying to put it all together yourself. Later on, you can try to put it together within your own mind and to get a better understanding of what is being stated by these various authors. So right now, before I begin, I have a copy of the Book of the Law, as you can see right here. I'm going to be taking a quote from the Book of the Law, and I'm going to be discussing it. I have a copy of James Hillman's Revisioning Psychology. I'm going to be drawing from that as well. I've already put up in the book, in the actual school, Isis Unveiled. This is an awesome reference material for the occult. A lot of people say that these things can't be verified. That's because they come from ancient sources, and some of it is actually channeled. Another work that I'm going to draw from, a quote that's within this book, is Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces. That's going to be very important. Direct source material, which is Human All Too Human. This is Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm going to be drawing from that book as well, a particular quote. And when we talk about Abraxas, I'm going to be reading some quotes from The Path of Initiation, which is by J.S. Gordon. This is an amazing book. I would definitely recommend it for everybody in this group. I purchased this book 3 years ago, and it's just amazing, some of the information that's contained in there. You're not going to find that information anywhere else. So what I want to begin talking about is the idea of satanic Gnosticism. Well, you'll find when you go and research this that this is a construction, you know, and taking certain ideas and applying those ideas to a new construct. if you look around, you're going to find that, you would be able to, if you thought it out, you would be able to switch certain gods from certain theologies to create a satanic Gnosticism. The reason why I had the video about satanic Gnosticism put up there is because I wanted you to be able to think outside the box. Within society, we have certain things that we're told we have to conform to. Well, within the Church of Babalon, and specifically in Mikasa Marais, we don't go by that at all. We don't respect that at all either. We challenge and question these people who claim that they have the authority to prevent us from, stepping outside of that box and being able to see a more clear picture. So the idea of satanic Gnosticism, which was given by Nargargoyle in his video, it states that things have been reversed, and rather than Jehovah being the transcendent God, Jehovah is actually the demiurge. And we're going to talk about that. That's the God that's kind of in between. He is below Sophia, his mother, and he is below the transcendent Father, who we consider to be Satan. So within this video perfectly describes what is discussed in the Book of Origin, which is the Ecclesia Luciferi Gnosticus Bible. And this Bible speaks of how things came to be, and a lot of research went into this Bible itself. A Bible is merely a biblia. It's a collection of writings. It's a revered collection of writings. So we shouldn't be worried about the word Bible and applying it in here, because there are certainly going to be revered collection of writings. If we put all those writings together, we would be able to call that a Bible. It doesn't have to be the so-called canonical scriptures that are put within the Christian's Holy Bible, which tries to say, well, this is all the only information. If you're a Christian, this is the only information you can consider and look at, because it is God's word through man. Well, there are a lot of other words, a lot of other writings that one should consider. There's nowhere in the Bible that says you can't look outside for the truth. The fact that they say that is an attempt to limit one's spiritual growth, and so we can draw upon many sources that we revere, and if we put those things into a book, we would call it a biblia, a Bible. So what is the source of this theology? Well, what is theology? Well, theology, simply put, is a study of the gods and the relationship of the gods to humanity, and also it often refers to the hypostasis of hierarchy, or the hyparxis. The hyparxis is what we've come to realize as the hierarchy. And I'm sure there's nobody in this group that hasn't heard of the hierarchy. What I'm speaking of is like how man feels that he is above the animals, and how we believe the animals are above the vegetables, the vegetation, and how the vegetation is above the minerals, and so on and so forth. If we Kabbalistically go up from man, after man we have the angels, or the angelic hierarchy. We have the demonic hierarchy as well. We have the demigods. Okay, we have the gods, which are the spiritual beings of the universe. We have God, which, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. We would just be best not to talk about God or place any type of restriction upon God. So understand, when I talk about the gods, I'm speaking of gods, lowercase gods, and not God, as in like the hidden God that we simply can't talk about because we're not equipped to do that. We can do that through, negation. We can say what God isn't, but we can't know everything about God. There is an infinite and unknown factor that we can't know about. That's where the mystery comes in. So, we're also going to talk about theosophy. Well, what is theosophy? Well, we're going to come to these weird definitions of what theosophy is. But I'm going to share to you from my own experience what I would define theosophy as. Theosophy is different than theology, although they kind of interconnect at certain points. But theosophy is looking at the fact of it's the divine wisdom. So theo, God, Sophia, wisdom. So what theosophy does is it takes a body of knowledge which pertains to the divine wisdom and the study of that divine wisdom. If we go within all different cultures, we're going to find that there were wise ones in every culture. I consider these wise ones in every culture the Druids. There are people that limit the Druids to the Celts as being the high priests of the Celts. And I would argue that there were Druids throughout the whole entire world. I don't ascribe to this limited definition or description of what the Druids are. They're simply wise ones, and in every culture you had wise ones. So here we have, theology and theosophy. Well, we're going to draw from the Isis Unveiled, Book 2, which is called the Theology. So we can take into account that there are keys within theology that connect to theosophy. And that was what Helena Petrovna Blavatsky was trying to point out, that these various understandings of how the gods relate to us, it can lead to a realization of wisdom. And that wisdom, if we apply it, can change our life. It can transform how we think. And I'm going to get into that in a few minutes. So, we need to now look at Isis Unveiled. And if you have a copy of Isis Unveiled, I'm going to refer to Book 2, which is, it starts at page 169. And the theology that that is strongly connected with the ecclesia is the Ophite theology. It's a Gnostic theology. And there's a reason, and I'm going to get into that within this lecture, there's a reason why we feel that this theology is much more authentic than other theologies. For one thing, if we go to this section in Isis Unveiled, particularly at page 170, if we're looking at that page, we can see how HPB has compared. We're looking at least 3 cultural theologies that are really speaking of the same thing. And her point is, if we went to every culture and we did this, we would find the same theosophical thread throughout all those cultures. So she begins speaking about the great first cause. And she describes in the Ophite theology the nameless or secret name. This is where we begin. We can't know it. It's a hidden God. It's nameless, doesn't have a name, or it has a secret name that we have to come to realize later on, and we are to keep that to ourselves. Okay? And then in the Ophite system, she says that whenever the Eternal awakes from its slumber and desires to manifest itself, it divides itself into male and female. It then becomes in every system the double-sex deity, the universal father and mother. In the Ophite system, the nameless spirit becomes Abrasax on the male side and Bythos on the female side. Okay? Then she goes on to say, from the union of the two emanates a third, or the creative principle, the Son, or the manifested Logos, the product of the divine mind. In the Ophite system, Ophis, another name for Enua, the Son. Moreover, each of these systems has a triple male trinity, each proceeding separately through itself from one female deity. So, for instance, in the Ophite system, the trinity consisted of the mystery named Psi, Bythos, Enua. These become one, who is Abrasax, from the virgin Sophia, for Numa, who herself is an emanation of Bythos and the mystery God, and emanates through them Christos. So this gives us a better understanding. This theology gives us a much better understanding, but we can also relate to the same idea of what we're told is the Trinity. You know, Christians say, well, we deal with the Trinity. Catholics do that. And they try to say that it's something that originated through Christianity. And we can realize through this knowledge that that's not true at all. That this idea has been carried out through many different cultures predating Christianity. So it could not have come from this specific religious system or theology. That theology is simply adopting the same Trinity system that has been found throughout other cultures. And it's revealed in Isis Unveiled. Now, the thing about Isis Unveiled is a wonderful book when it comes to reference material. I wouldn't advise anybody to try to read from cover to cover. There's a lot of information to be absorbed through doing that, and one can drive themselves crazy trying to figure out all of these ideas and how they go together. The point is, the book is called The Master Key for a reason, because you can use this as a reference to be able to discuss various ideas with masters. It emanated from the masters. And that is what Isis Unveiled was all about. HPB said that her teachers allowed this information during that time to be able to be released to humanity. Before that, there was a lot of exoteric, which is outer, rather than esoteric teachings. There was a lot of exoteric teachings that were just reinterpreted and way off point from what was originally being said esoterically. So the masters decided to release certain information to be able to balance out this ignorance that was being poured out into the world. Okay? So we've gone over Isis Unveiled, and I would suggest that in order to do your assignment, I would focus on around page 169, book 2. Okay? So another interesting point is, and I've said this a few times, but this is going to become very important. My mentor taught me that magic is nothing more, when it's unveiled, it's nothing more than psychology. That doesn't limit what it does and what we're able to accomplish through this understanding of psychology. We can gain peace and harmony within ourselves, and we can become centered. And when we become truly self-centered, centered within the self, the true self, we can express and manifest our will a lot more effectively and smoothly without having all kinds of things opposing our will. So that's the importance of understanding the psyche, and that's what we're actually talking about. These ideas would relate to the psyche, which is the image maker. Everybody has a psyche, and that image maker continues to make images. Okay? That is what the psyche is. The human soul is a collection of images over and over and over and over again. And when we can speak through these images, we can send to the human soul, and through this hidden God, our will, what we would like to have manifested in our life. So this belief that everything is not connected is ridiculous. I see everything as simultaneously connected, and it'll prove itself to be so as we continue to go along. It's important to have this connection to the psyche when we're dealing with magic, because there is that side where we can consciously know things, and there is that side which it's hidden from us, it's unconscious. And we spoke of that when I was talking about the hidden God. There are things that we cannot know about, and this is the things that I'm talking about. We know very little when it comes to the idea of what archetypes are. What we do know is within various cultures, certain initiates have talked about these eternal forms. Plato was one of those people, and of course we're going to discuss Nietzsche. Nietzsche was the person who illuminated Jung in this idea. Jung was trying to critique or criticize Nietzsche's writing. Thus spoke Zarathustra. And what he came to realize is this wasn't madness. This was divine madness, if it was madness. And it was based on trying to discuss various ideas or archetypes that had guided Nietzsche in realizing the truth about reality, his reality, and how we can take this imagery and we can be illuminated on what direction we should take or should not take. And so he began to look at Thus Spoke Zarathustra in a whole different light. So, why do we care? Well, we care because all of this isn't just, spiritual, metaphysical nonsense. This relates to humanity. Okay, this knowledge relates to humanity. So, at this time, I would like to read from Joseph Campbell's The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And again, you can download this book. It's in PDF. I've downloaded it a few times. It's a matter of taking the effort to do so and being able to look at the information, having the courage within yourself to challenge your beliefs, the beliefs that you think are correct. Often they're misconceived, and by challenging those beliefs, we can grow. As long as we don't challenge those beliefs, we don't grow. So Nietzsche says in this quote, in relation to the archetypes, it says, compare Nietzsche, quote, in our sleep and in our dreams, we pass through the whole thought of earlier humanity. I mean, in the same way that man reasons in his dreams, he reasoned when in the waking state many thousands of years. The dream carries us back into earlier states of human culture and affords us a means of understanding it better. Unquote. Now, that's an important quote, and that's directly from Human All Too Human, First and Last Things. And so that connects the archetypes not simply to a God that is hidden from us and we can't know about it, but it gives us a better idea of what this God, this hidden God, consists of. And like I said, it consists of these symbols, these images, these ideas that continue to repeat over and over again. Like we're being sent a message of what, if we pay attention when we're dreaming, and we don't interpret that dream personally. We take the ego out of it, and we just look at the imagery from, say, the underworld, as applicable as interpreting all phenomena as a particular dealing upon this hidden God in the soul, okay, then we can get a better understanding of what is going on, what the dream was all about. We can see it clearly that it's within the myths, it's within the stories, it's within our movies, it's within the media. It's the expression of our psyche, our souls, our mind. It's a part of our mind. And we have the ability to connect to these things. So the next part that I wanted to talk about is this is what led Carl Jung to formulate what was called his depth psychology. And I'm a student of James Hillman. I've continued beyond, beyond Sigmund Freud, who, if you watched the other videos, the 4 videos, you would have seen how he connected Abraxas to this thelemic idea of Sigmund Freud's, id, the id, the ego, and the superego. And what I would like you to see in this is perhaps it's time, like Jung did, to transcend this system because there's a part of the system that is hid from us unless we choose to enter into the unconscious and look at the symbology, the symbols, the myths, and how they affect us and how they affect how we think on an unconscious level and how they influence our lives. There's always that part of ourselves that's hid from ourselves. And you got to understand, Freud didn't agree with Jung. He didn't want to open up that can of worms. He said, well, wait a minute, if we enter into that, there's no telling what that's going to bring about. And Jung said, no, I'm going to, I don't believe that everything is based on just this libido, this death instinct. I also feel there's an instinct for life, and I intend on showing and proving that. Well, it's interesting that he talks about that, because that's the basis of Gnosticism, is to connect with that instinct of life, that vital principle that's within our mind and connected. Our mind and our body are not separate, okay? They might appear to be separate, but they're not separate at all. If you affect the mind, you affect the body, okay? And later on we'll get into that, but right now we're going to stay with the outline of what we're talking about right now. So the reason why we care, like I pointed out, is these things, these ideas, these conceptions, they return us back to what the self is. When everything is individuated and realized as a oneness, like the image of Abraxas that's spoken of in the other videos, we begin to see how all these things are contained within our consciousness, and they're not separate from us. Now, I'm not saying they can't manifest outside of ourselves, not at all. That can occur. If that is your true will to make that occur, it can occur. Okay? But what I'm talking about is our consciousness within everything else. So everything is contained within that consciousness, and nothing is outside of that consciousness. Okay? And that's a very important realization when it comes to Abraxas. And Nargargoyle kind of alludes to it, but he never actually comes out and says that. He never comes out and says that Abraxas, the image of Abraxas, is an attempt to take and synthesize many different ideas within the human consciousness. Okay? The actual symbol, hold on a minute, I'm actually looking for something in the should actually bookmark these pages so I don't have to go through this. Okay, so here we go. So J.S. Gordon states in the chapter on consciousness and the evolutionary instinct, which is what we're talking about, he states that Abraxas is a, I'm going to read what he actually states here so that one can actually see what is being spoken of. For those interested in Gnostic philosophy, it might be worthwhile pausing here to indicate one or two parallels with which very few are familiar. Working from above to below, we start with the idea that the field of cosmic Buddhi is the same as the Ein Sof Or of the Kabbalists, and the pleroma of the Gnostic. The primordial emanation from this, the Kabbalistic Kether, or first Sephiroth, gave rise to what the Gnostics named Abraxas, which appears to mean quite literally the emanating heart center. The Egyptian ABR, which is the pivotal polar axis, hence axis of logic manifestation. This has been defined by C.G. Jung as the fiery force which acts as the primeval union of the opposites at the foundation of psychic life. It is a deity symbolically presented as a triad having the head of a cockerel, the body of a man, and the serpent and serpents for legs. This deity itself, equivalent to the cosmic persona of the Logos, hence its true nature. By virtue of its own self-emanation, it duly gave rise to a secondary god, that known to the Gnostics as Ildabaoth, meaning, as Blavatsky tells us, the child born in the egg of chaos. This projection is thereby synonymous with the Aeonic demiurge, having a sevenfold nature and responsible for endless cycles of existence, in which the celestially fallen man, the divine spark, became trapped. The planetary demiurge thus emanated within itself that hierarchy of lesser hosts given the name Sabaoth, which, as Stephen Holler tells us, quote, is represented as a power who repented of the dark deeds of his demiurge father and came to worship Sophia, wisdom, and her daughter Zoe, life, and was rewarded by receiving light and becoming the ruler of the seventh heaven. So this is an interesting description because it actually speaks, if we can see very clearly, it speaks of how the demiurge is the alienated ego, and Sophia is that psyche that has to go through everything in order to find the ontological self. And so we can see how, within this Gnostic realization, how it applies to our own self, and through this mythos, how we realize our true ontological self, that which is beyond the ego. So, the next thing that we need to consider is how these things can be utilized for what I'm going to call a magical mapping. And I get this idea from Isis Unveiled, which is of course HPB's book, but also it applies on a deeper level to Her Voice of Silence,